Good night, everyone. Okay. Good night, everyone. All right. So I'm just so I know I'm not here alone. Look how you're doing tonight. All right. Great, great, great. No. Yes, yes. So once again, good night and welcome. Let me do my housekeeping first, of course, and not at the end. We are live on Facebook at WeCulture. Just in case, you can feel free to go back and check the program of tonight or previous programs. By the way, my name is Sonny Joseph Richardson, and welcome to us here for over 2 years. So we've been here. Now, with that being said, WeCulture is a platform that we created to get together once a month and have some meaningful conversations in carrying on in the name of the ancestors, so to speak. Because I stand here before you today, non-apologetically as an African. And I'm here because somebody was strong, whether it was 160 years ago, whether it was 200, 300 years ago, to make it through the Middle Passage and to be here. Being a man may have been a woman, but somewhere somebody survived that ship and coming through the Atlantic and being able to be on this side as it was called and still the new world, so to speak. So we're doing a series from that started last month on the freedom of the mind, leading up to the 1st of July or July month, because WeCulture takes place the last. Now, what does that mean? How the process would go? And that we'll try and unpack tonight. And we have a couple of panelists, which would, and of course, when we do WeCulture, we always like it to be interactive. And I see some very interesting faces in the audience here. And those of you who are viewing on Facebook, of course, you can send in your questions to, answer as best as we can. With that being said, panelists, know who you are. Can you please take a seat? And then we can get started with the procedure. Now, we do things something a little different. Like I say, we're carrying on in the name of the ancestors. Back in the days, or 100 years ago, this might have been held under a big baobab tree or some mango tree someplace. But we are here to initiate. With that being said, ladies first, let's start up over here, and let's do it.
Thank you, Sonny. Buonochi. Buonochi to the colleagues sitting next to me, Alvin, Luciano. It's a pleasure for being here and sharing tonight with you. And I'm very grateful for the invitation received, and I think this is a very interesting topic because it's a topic living its own life currently within the kingdom. But first of all, let me present myself. My name is Kathleen Cruz. I'm a lawyer in international European law. I used to work at the Office of European Kingdom Relations of Aruba. And currently, since 2021, I'm a member of Parliament, the youngest member. Since 2017, I started a political career on the AVP political party. And since 2 years ago, officially a representative of the community. And currently, we are having many discussions on this topic.
Celeste and also Mr. Richardson for the invitation to be here this evening. It's a pleasure, it's an honor for sure. My name is Alvin Molina. By trade, I'm a police officer. This year we'll be making 25 years on the police force. Were it not that I took a little sidestep for a while into politics, and at the moment I'm just like my colleague Khalid, I'm a member of Parliament in the coalition for the party of MEP. And I must say about the topic, it's not only a very interesting topic, but for sure a very important topic, coming out of a very dark past, actually. Aruba, other colonies, in relationship to the colonizers. And right now we're on a crossroad, and we have to decide and make good use, actually, that sounds kind of bad, but make good use of the moment that we have right now, of the opportunities that we have to fix of all the bad things that happened in the past. And how that is going to happen, that's all up to us. Like Khalid just mentioned, from the parliament we have
Members of Parliament, good evening, folks who are following us on Facebook and those present here at Culture Cafe. Thank you, We Culture, Sonny and Celeste, for the invitation this evening, and of course, Nicholas and his staff here at Culture Cafe. Very interesting topic, and as Sonny indicated, I will be talking a bit about the topic and the legalities. For those who do not know me, my name is Luciano Miriam. I am currently a lecturer in law and philosophy at the University of Aruba, and I'm happy to be here sitting in my city where I was born, and this place and all that is going on here. So all the best, and looking forward to hear your thoughts on this very timely topic, and see how we can move things forward. All right.
Yes, give it up to Mr. Luciano. And with that being said, we're actually going to go right back to him. But, you know, I hope that by now,
All right. To Sonny. I'm a teacher, usually I stand, but for this occasion, and given the fact the camera is pointing this way, I'm going to sit behind the table, and I'm going to do some lecturing from behind the table. And as I always mention, at this age, I have to remove my glasses. So with your permission, I will remove the glasses, and I'll put them right here. All right, so the topic for the evening, as it was presented to me, was the following. How can we hold the enslavers accountable for what went on many centuries ago? But before I get into the legalities, into the law, the norms of this very timely topic, I would like to paint the scene so it can be clear on what exactly we are talking about. What are we talking about? Clear property of European monarchs, enterprises, countries, and individuals. They were enslaved, tortured, raped, was trampled, removed, and an immense sense of human suffering. That is what we're talking about. Then came the period in which slavery and the slave trade were abolished. And in that post-abolition period, we see a struggle to recognize that the slave trade and slavery were crimes against humanity. A struggle with and a struggle against racism, exclusion, inequality in many forms by people's zeitgeist. Positions of privilege are questioned and no longer tolerated. Social constructs of oppression, equality, and disenfranchisement are forcefully on their pedestals. There is a worldwide call for accountability against historical injustices. Remember the movement Black Lives Matter, all as global engines calling for a change. It is thus in this context that nations, institutions like churches and universities have started to issue regrets, apologies, concerns for the wrongful acts of trading and enslaving people of African descent for centuries. Many cannot deal with this past and the fact that their current wealth is the fruits of trade and ownership of human beings. Also, within the Kingdom of the Netherlands, we are dealing collectively with the topic of transatlantic slavery and its current effects. The shout for reparations is loud. Monetary reparations, that is. The question that presents itself is, how can we use the law to deal with this matter before us? Yes, how can the enslavers be held accountable, and how can there be a form of reparative, restorative justice for the enslaved? Let's look at the legalities. Let's look at the legal framework that we need to address. First of all, from the point of international law, we have a number of issues before we can talk about accountability. I would like to mention the two most important items. First of all, we are dealing with an issue that happened many years ago. What do I mean? If we create a law now declaring slavery and the slave trade a crime against humanity, we have the principle of what we call in law an ex post facto law, meaning we are creating a law to declare something a crime before the law was created. And we struggle thus with this principle, which is also called the principle of non-retroactivity in international law. And this is prohibited in international instruments such as the European Convention on Human Rights, Article 7, we're dealing with Article 15 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. That's one issue. The second issue is, of course, was slavery at that time legal according to the legal systems of the country? Evidence out there to declare that at that time slavery was not legal based on the legal systems of many countries, but it remains debatable. All right? So these are two issues that the international law presents to us. If in the event we decide at the level of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, to move forward and create a law, this is what we need to do. I will just give a brief outline, and then in the panel discussion, more information can be given. Of course, the discussion must start in the parliaments of the Netherlands, Aruba, Curaçao, and Sint Maarten, and also in the three island councils of Bonaire, Statia, and Sint Maarten. We have to make a transition. Okay.
In a truck. laptop, please.
You see, our forefathers start crying.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll take this one.
It stopped?
Yes. This is school strike? Yes. That's what we had the same issue. Exactly. But the show must go on. The show must go on. All right. Thank you. And Luciano, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Sonny. So we have transitioned inside. So let's continue. As I was saying, the discussion must start in all bodies where we find representatives of the people. So that's in the Parliament of Aruba, in the Parliament of Curacao, in the Netherlands in the Parliament, St. Martin, and also in the three island councils of Bonaire, St. Eustatius, and Saba. Here is where the discussion needs to start. What do we want within this kingdom in terms of talking about slavery, talking about the slave trade, and saying we want to see that slavery and slave trade be declared crimes against humanity, and we would like to see reparations and all of this laid down in law. Can we mentioned it that these are discussions to follow. First of all, when it comes to a law of the whole kingdom, a number of individuals can take the initiative to come with the law. First of all, Article 15 of the Charter of the Kingdom, het Statuut van het Koninkrijk in Dutch, Article 15, paragraph 3, gives the power to the minister plenipotentiaries who sit in The Hague, the representatives of Aruba, Curaçao, and St. Martin, give them the right to initiate a kingdom law. Secondly, this right is given to every member in the second chamber of the Dutch Parliament. All 150 members of the Tweede Kamer have the right to initiate such a kingdom law. And then thirdly, the kingdom government, minister responsible for kingdom affairs, has the right to present such a law before Parliament for approval. Once the draft law has been created, text of the law, and the explanatory memorandum, in Dutch we talk about the wetstext, you see all of the articles, and the memorie van toelichting, the explanatory memorandum, explaining why did we come with this law, what is the definition of every article, every provision within the law. Once all of this is created, it goes then to the second chamber of the Dutch Parliament, the Tweede Kamer, with also, of course, the advice of the Council of State, in Dutch, de Raad van State, in this case, van het Koninkrijk. Then the parliaments have the power, the right to draft a report on this bill that is before the second chamber for consideration. Thus, the Parliament of Aruba, Curaçao, and St. Martin must meet together and study the law and draft up a report and send this report to the second chamber saying we agree with the content or we would advise changes to be made to the bill before the second chamber. This is a right enshrined in the Charter of the Kingdom and Statute, Article 16 of the Charter. Then comes the moment of consideration and deliberation within the second chamber. The minister plenipotentiary who sits in The Hague, he has the right during the time it's being debated. These parliaments can send representatives, special delegates, to the deliberations in the second chamber. So yet another instrument from our end, well, to propose an amendment to the bill before it's approved. So yet another instrument we find, Article 17 of the Charter, this bill. Then, just before the bill is voted on, the minister plenipotentiary is given yet again the last chance to indicate if he is against the bill or if in his opinion the bill can go forward. And this right is also given to the members of parliament who are present in the Netherlands from Aruba, Curaçao, and St. Martin. Then it goes to a vote. If the bill is accepted by less than 3/5 majority in the second chamber, then the bill will be reconsidered in the Council of Ministers of the Kingdom, where we have all of the Dutch ministers and the 3 ministers plenipotentiary. So thus I want to point out how many moments in the legislative process there is where the members of parliament and the governments from Aruba, Curacao, and St. Martin can influence the process of the legislation. Then, once it's approved in the second chamber by the 150 members of the second chamber, the Trinity Kammer, then the bill is right to move up to the first chamber, the Enslavement Kammer, where 75 members will consider the bill. Also in the first chamber, the members of Aruba, Curacao, and St. Martin, and the minister plenipotentiary have the right to exercise, to give information about their ideas of their governments and their parliaments with regards to the bill. Once that stage is passed, the 75 members of the first chamber, they approve it or disapprove it. That's their prerogative. They cannot change it in the first chamber. They cannot make amendments to the bill. And then the bill is done. The parliamentary stage of the bill is done. And then the bill is forwarded to the government of the kingdom for signatures by the king and by the minister responsible for kingdom affairs, or maybe even more ministers, and then the bill is published in the official bulletins within the Netherlands and within all other parts of the kingdom. Thus ends the legislative process of a bill, and then we have a bill called, for instance, Bill on the transatlantic slavery and reparations, etc., etc. If we want within the bill to create a special fund, which is being considered even as we speak in the Netherlands, then it can be laid down here in this law of the kingdom, and thus concludes then the legislative process within the kingdom of the Netherlands. Thank you.
Give it up. Yes. So, yes. Now, by now I hope you guys have some questions, right? Before we go on to the next episode. In your years of studies and now as a professor teaching law, have you ever had conversations, or has there been any attempt to try and start such a law?
As far as I know, in our setting, no. In the years in teaching in the Netherlands, in the Groningen, and here at the University of Aruba, to my knowledge, there has not been an initiative to draft such a law, to my knowledge.
With that being said, by show of hand, is there any question? Wow, okay, before we get to our parliamentarians and as to how they see such an initiation taking place. Let's see, go to
slavery, a crime against humanity. And could you, if that's really possible, could you explain that, please? How that process would go?
Okay, sure. So, okay, we can take it from different angles. Let's take it from the international law field. Countries can come together, states, and decide to draft a treaty, an international treaty, in which they declare slavery, the transatlantic slavery, the trade, as a crime against international law. And in the process of drafting this treaty between different states or within the United Nations, for instance, they can, the Netherlands, our kingdom, can give a declaration stating that within the realm of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, this right laid down in the treaty will have a direct effect on the entry into force of the treaty. That is possible. So just briefly, the process of treaty negotiations. So countries come together, as I mentioned, negotiate a treaty. Then a text is created, of course, with what we call, we use the French term, the travaux préparatoires, the preparatory works. Then the treaty needs to go before all of the national parliaments. And they are approved or disapproved before the national parliaments. And then in the treaty stated when the treaty enters into force. It can be upon 5 countries signing up to the treaty, or after 25 countries have signed up into the treaty, onto the treaty. And once it has entered into force, then it is legally binding on all parties to the treaty. And then if, in this case, slavery has been declared a crime against humanity, that means it's an international crime. That means that all states have the right, if there's a case of slavery, to prosecute the case within its own legal order. That's in the nutshell what can take place. The issue remains, and it remains a very interesting issue for the legal scholars, as I mentioned outside. How are we going to construe a law or a treaty now in 2023 to declare facts that took place centuries ago? How are we going to construe?
For a while. Okay, you mentioned the transatlantic slave trade, but in the history that we got at school, the first slaves were the Reuben Indians. You didn't mention that in case you will have any kind of compensation, that it will go to them also. Secondly, the slaves were stolen from Africa. Humans stolen from Africa. How can Aruba claim any money on slaves that were not stolen from Aruba?
From Africa. Okay. Yes, thanks, Val. Let's deal with the first item. That is why it was important for me to lay down very clear what is the topic at hand. Given the fact when we start to discuss the topic about the transatlantic slavery, many times we bring in other topics. Indeed, the position of the indigenous populations. We bring in the modern forms of slavery. All interesting topics, all topics that need attention, but the focus is solely on the enslavement and the trade of people of African descent within those years that I mentioned. That is one. Secondly, when it comes to people of African descent who were brought to Aruba involuntarily, when it comes to people of African descent who now reside in Aruba, who descend from maybe other islands or other countries, definitely they will fall within the ambit of being descendants to those who were brought in former centuries to the islands or to the countries. So you will have to construe and say, once you can claim that you are of African descent, and it's clear that you are a descendant of enslaved Africans, then you will have a strong claim.
All right, to switch it a little bit, I know Susie and Mr. Atwell had questions. Hold on to those, but to get our other panelists involved in the conversation, I wanted to pose this question to Christine. As someone who worked in the European, you was represented the European Union in terms of dissemination of information and so forth. And you said the discussion is going on now, or it has been actually speak as to what do we do with it. How is it being received and on what level
took or made the UN, the United Nations, take the initiative of making some declarations, and these declarations have been very recently done. I think it was in 2020 that Michelle Bachelet, the High Commissioner of United Nations Commission for Human Rights, did a declaration in Geneva that they call upon all the countries around the world to start putting this topic on the agenda. And I think it has been 3 years that we have seen so many movements, Black Lives Matter, and one thing that we see now, after 3 years, that everybody is actually trying to identify the purpose. Why are we talking about this now? And we can, Mr. Luciano just explained very well the procedure, but it goes back to identify why we would like to initiate this procedure. And this has been identified also in many committees that we have, for example, the interparliamentarian meetings that we have within the Kingdom, Aruba, Curacao, the Netherlands, and St. Martin. And in last February, we were in Curacao, and this was one of the main topics of the agenda for the IPCO. And what we saw and what I experienced is that people are still trying to identify what were and what still are the after effects, the feelings, and what is actually the purpose of doing what we are doing. Initiating this procedure of saying sorry to the people, or how do we make it good to them, but we are still missing identifying what do we want. Because whatever we do, whatever we initiate with, the law will have to actually meet the purpose of the people. So the discussion here today is very important to have, because we have to know from the community what each has experienced, or what the feelings are they're living in currently, and how does this, or how this will affect the procedure we would like to continue with, and what do we actually want. And I think finding the purpose of everything and finding the purpose should be actually one of the main conclusions, including for tonight, before we start talking about initiating such a procedure. Like Renata has already said, apologized last year, they're creating funds, but what would this mean for us? What do we want from these funds? Do we want to make law that will serve the past, criminalize slavery? Do we want to make laws to serve now and the future? Do we want to educate people what happened? Or do we want to educate how to move forward despite what happened? And we see that there are many experiences.
Let's take it now, Molina, locally, you go to the parliament. What is it being said? Is there any conversation outside of the EPCO, sorry. EPCO. And but in the local parliament and out in the, in your constituency, when you go around and you're meeting the people, can you take us your thoughts on something such as the law?
Yes, thank you, definitely, especially the topic of reparations is something very, very actual, something that's being spoken about, I wouldn't say daily, but for sure a lot. And before I continue with your question, I would like to react first on Val's question, because Val had a very valid question. Like, if I break it down, you were asking who would be entitled to get reparation, and who are the persons that are supposed to give the reparation, or the ones responsible for slavery in this case. Because, as you mentioned, it's something very broad. The time that we're talking about now is a long time. It's a long period of time. But even before African slaves were brought from Africa to this side of the world, there was 1,000 years of slavery going on already with African slaves by Africans and Arabs. But before they were transported transatlantic, there was a lot of it going on already. So if we speak worldwide, who are the ones obliged to give the reparation, and who are the ones entitled to reparations? I think that's a very interesting topic, and it's something that deserves the attention as well. But here from Aruba, from the Caribbean, I think we should especially stick to what happened in this region, on this island, in that period of time. And like Helene also said, what did we learn from the past? How do we treat it in the present? How are we going to continue it forward, together with the ones that are responsible for the slave trade back then? So yeah, it's a topic that's it's very actual, and if you see the reparation, for starters, I'm 100% pro reparations, by the way. We have to see how we're going to go about it, how we can actually make the topic work for us as a community, as an island. The Dutch, they had colonies all over the world, all different. In the Caribbean, Aruba was one of them as well. The Spanish was in charge here a while. In between, the English took over. But anyway, the Dutch have a biggest part of the colonialism, of the slave trade here on Aruba. And not only when you see it according to the period of time, but also what they got out of Aruba compared to, for example, the Spanish and the English. But that we did not benefit from. And if we did benefit from it, imagine on all aspects of progress on the island, where would we be at today? And for that reason, that we as a country, as a nation, did not benefit, and others clearly did benefit, I think that reparation is definitely something that should be on the table, and should be discussed, and is being discussed as well, like you said, not only by IPCO. Let me say something about IPCO, by the way, because Mr. Milgaard spoke about the Eerste Tweede Kamer in Holland. Tweede Kamer have 150 members. The Eerste Kamer, we have representation for sure on paper, but that's one of the topics that we're talking about in IPCO a lot, is about the democratic deficit. That's one part of it, is the level, the amount of representation that we truly have in Holland, in the Eerste Kamer. So that's a topic that's being spoken about in IPCO. I don't know if the solution will come for it that quickly, but another importance, another strength for IPCO is that within the kingdom we have the opportunities to talk to our fellow colleagues from the islands, but also from Holland, and share with them our thoughts, our wishes, our fears, our whatever we want to talk about, and try for us to get as much as possible on the same level. And the more we achieve that, for them to share our thoughts and our wishes, the more our representation grows, not only in the Eerste Kamer, but also in the Tweede Kamer. So that's why I think that the IPCO is very important, that we have to take it very serious, and we have to make sure that we take every benefit out of it as much as possible. And how do we do that? By sharing our history and sharing our fears, share what we, our ancestors did pass through, what effect that has up to today for us as a nation, as a very young nation, might I say. And yeah, hopefully reach the conclusions in July, right? July presentation from that will come.
Okay, so as panelists, feel free to chime in anytime, but let me just add this. We're dealing with one aspect tonight. Reparation is such a broad, and what it would look like, we'll have to leave it there as a conversation for next time. But I have to be devil's advocate just like you, and we'll leave reparation right there. And as we continue the conversation, it can go certain directions as to what it would look like. Mr. Millian.
Yes, I just want to repeat once more. As a teacher, you need to keep repeating. What is the case before us? The case before us, the topic that we're dealing with, is indeed the enslavement of people of African descent in a given period. We know many other people were enslaved. It was to that topic because it's a tough topic. We don't want to deal with it. There are many emotions. People want to run away from it. But let's stick to it. Now is the time. We're busy with it. Let's deal with the issue. When it comes to reparation, I still want to touch on reparation. That's the privilege of being a panelist on the reparation. Exactly. Yes, he can't silence the mic. There are examples that I personally like. When I look at some elite institutions like Harvard, for instance, they did their research and they came to the conclusion that Harvard was built, was maintained with slave labor. And they said, how can we repair this wrongful act? And what did they do? They set up a scholarship. They have identified all of the descendants of those who built and maintained Harvard, and they said every descendant of these individuals will be entitled to have a scholarship to go to Harvard. For me, that is reparations. Many churches have come forward, and in the Christian tradition, they have said, we have sinned because we have participated, we have profited, we have condoned slavery, and we need to make reparations to the faithful within our churches. We have discriminated. We have said people of African descent must worship in different churches. We have not been faithful to the Christian gospel, and we must make reparations. So institutions have gone before countries, have gone before enterprises, because many enterprises, the Nederlandse Bank, the Dutch Central Bank, they have profited. How can we make reparations for these wrongful acts of human beings? That is the case before us.
I agree with Mr. Million, of course, and we have seen that also on the Caribbean level. The CARICOM, the Caribbean community, has also been trying the last few years to identify what would reparation mean for them. They just published, I think, last year, a 10-point reparation plan, desires. What would that mean for us, and how do we voice it out on a kingdom level during the IPCO? We identified, for example, St. Martin's necessities or ideals, reparation ideas are not the ones that Aruba has, and the same goes for Curacao. One topic that we had pretty much consensus on was education. How do we, if it should be monetary or not, how do we educate our people of what happened and what is the legacy that has been left behind of what happened back then, and how do we educate our community to live forward and knowing the basic principles of what can and what cannot be. And I think tonight, and I already mentioned it, we have to start finding purposes, because we are here to voice what the community's desires and wants are. And once we have that, we can also have a clearer view of what it can mean for us, because as we see, the Netherlands is very active on this agenda. They have many ideas and purposes presented. I think Mr. Milliard already mentioned the Nederlandse Bank. I think they're also being part of this movement currently. They have also given some kind of information of being available to give funding projects for the island. So we have to be prepared, and we have to know beforehand what do we feel? And I think it's a very nice opportunity tonight to maybe also hear some more of everybody present, what the feels are. And when we talk about this current topic, now, today, what does that mean for us, for our children, and what do we want? Whatever law it might be, whatever plan we might present, what do we want from it? And I hope we can get there tonight.
Well, given that this establishment has to be closed pretty soon, those two young ladies in the back are looking at you. So let me go. Susie, are you prepared with the question? Let's go to Susie and then. Okay, there you go. All right. Professor.
Hi, good evening. My name is it on?
Yeah, it's fine.
My name is Suzette Humphrey, and first of all, thank you for presenting all of this. It's been very enlightening so far. About being completely pro reparations, and the extremely valid question that Ms. Cruz is asking about what do we want. Personally, the way I would verbalize what I would love to see is an acknowledgement of existing systems and a reform of those systems that still keep elements of race-based exclusion alive, and that make race a factor that is still determining and limiting. I'm better in saying it in Dutch, dat een ras toch altijd een bepalende en beperkende factor is. We leven in systemen die dat nog steeds mogelijk maken. Dus wat ik zou willen, what I would want, is to see efforts and energies being put into acknowledging that those systems still exist, and that a reform of those systems is required in order to reduce the factor of race and how limiting and determining it is. So now, that's my comment. Now my question directly to Luciano. Luciano, I'm a little bit confused. The way you explained the whole process, it sounds, and that's why I'm asking for clarification, like the law to make slavery a crime against humanity. The way you explained it sounds like that is a prerequisite for reparations. And so I just want clarification as to whether that is what you are telling us today.
All right. Yeah. Yes. Okay. No. We need to establish first, of course, are we dealing with a crime, right? Or because you want to hold someone or an institution responsible.
Accountable.
Yes, accountable. Thanks. Thus, you need to establish first if the acts that were committed, if they are deemed acts, criminal acts, act against crime against humanity, and then if yes, who is responsible? So you are busy, like you indicated. You can say some things better in Dutch when it comes to law as well. The toerekening from the act that was committed to the person, the perpetrator. You need to punch through that first. And once you can establish that this act was committed by that perpetrator, then we can, as a form to somewhat restore that which was lost. So you need to punch through it step by step, to make the legal case.
So reparations can only be a result of accepting a crime having been committed.
Yes.
Am I understanding you?
Yes. You need to, because if it was or legal what was done, it was not a crime against humanity, it was not a crime against anything, it was just legal, that we cannot speak in terms of reparation.
My name is Arthur King. Thanks a great deal for the presentations. Very good. Really satisfying. In terms of law, if my memory serves me right, I think in 2001, the United Nations organized an international conference in South Africa, in Durban, where slavery was called, registered by the United Nations as a crime against humanity, right? So the thing is, why do we need a new law? When the law is there, international law. I'm not finished yet, sorry. The law is there, so that law could be used, I presume. But I'm not a lawyer. Something else. Anyway, I'm sitting here looking at the word there called consciousness. And I think that's one of the problems that we have in Aruba, consciousness, awareness of the slavery past, right? And how it affected all of us, whether you're a Red Indian slave or African slave or slaveholder or book holder or whatever you were, etc., etc. It affected all of us. That's consciousness. Now, Ms. Cruz, you placed a very important point when you said we have to know what we want. And that's one of the biggest problems we have right now. We don't know collectively what we want, not even individually. Right? We don't know what we want. That has to be
Just like what I want.
I'm talking in general. I'm talking in general. That the whole thing, the whole consciousness in Aruba isn't there yet. The discussion hasn't taken place. And when excuses are done by the Dutch minister, president, by Rutte or whoever, or the king, to whom are they making excuses? And on one basis, right? But the same thing with Aruba. Discussion about conscious, right? Right? Keeping, stop denying, start keeping the whole idea of slavery at a distance, embracing it, and having really good discussions about what we want, right?
Thank you, Mr. King. Anyone, feel free.
All right. I knew someone was going to bring up that point, so I came prepared.
Okay.
I have here this is a letter from the Human Rights Commissioner, where he talks about that conference in Durban, South Africa, where a declaration was made, which is not legally binding. The declaration, bear with me. So the Human Rights Commissioner is telling the International Law Commission that is drafting articles on crimes against humanity. The commissioner is telling them, remember what was said in Durban, to please add these items into the articles to declare inter alia slavery of Africans as a crime. So it's in just paragraph 13, they're pointing out, this is Durban, we acknowledge that slavery and the slave trade, including the transatlantic slave trade, were appalling tragedies in the history of humanity. not only because of their abhorrent barbarism, but also in terms of their magnitude, organized nature, and especially their negation of the essence of the victims. Just a few sentences more, and further acknowledge that slavery and the slave trade are a crime against humanity and should always have been so, especially the Atlantic slave trade, and are among the major sources and manifestations of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance, etc. So, once more, quoting from what was said at Durban, which was a declaration, once more, not legally binding, the High Commissioner took it upon commission in, and if this document is adopted by the United Nations, then it comes fully legally binding.
You wanted to rebuttal there?
I think what happened in South Africa, 3 countries refused to sign. Holland, Israel, and the United States of America.
We'll get to let's the panel.
I just wanted to add, happens to be that Netherlands is the country now offering or apologizing, and actually I wanted to put a question to Mr. Molina, being the representative of the government, to maybe have the answer for all of us, from who to who this apology has been done and given, because we here still don't really understand and know in what way do we have to accept this apology, and how come is it coming from them and from where it came. So I don't know if maybe from, as a representative of the government, you might have an answer for all of us tonight.
Thank you, Kevin, for the great question. And to try to answer that question in combination with the point of what do we really want, because what we have right now is an apology for Jew that we have on the table. From whom? Yeah, from, like you say, the president from Holland, to whom, in this case, to the colonies, former colonies, to Aruba. But it's just an apology, and we can't eat no bread off an apology, and that's not going to work. And if you see too, just now Carleen mentioned already the Caribbean community, the CARICOM. What we want as an individual is not easy to determine. Sometimes it's not easy what we want to say, what we want for this weekend, you know, let alone what we want to do with slavery and our slavery history and what we're going to do in the future with it. But that's why we have different committees, different organizations, different entities that, you know, come together and decide what, in their opinion, could be a way forward from our dark past. And if you see the one from CARICOM itself, they came with a plan for the reparation, and the first one was the apology. Well, okay, we kind of had that one, right? Good apology, perhaps, but also there they made a mistake already by not involving the colonies in the process, in the startup process of how we're going to deal with our slavery past. So, although it's nice to get an apology, they dropped the ball by not involving the ones that they're apologizing to in this whole process. And you know, if you see the 10 things that are mentioned, I'm not going to mention all, but we spoke about repatriation already for those that would like to go back to Africa, the development, you know, people, how the slaves and people in the colonies were kept backwards because of exploitation, of not being part of the developments within the colony, to be fixed, cultural as well. People who are pulled out of their nation, out of the country, out of the culture, from their families. That also has to be, by the way, a lot of these topics, some of them sound easier than other ones to fix. But as to what do we want, I think the CARICOM and also, what's the other one named, Shackles of History, catering on for later. You know, there are several document plans of operations should look like, and then how the countries together are actually going to execute these reparations. Because if you see one, for example, I didn't know about it, was the public health crisis. You know, if they're talking about how people from African descent are physically, they suffered DNA-wise through the transatlantic voyage and how they were treated throughout the centuries. How are you going to fix that? You know, that sounds very complicated to me, but it sounds very reasonable that you will do something to undo the bad that has been done to the descendants from African descendants physically. How are you going to do that? But like that, again, there are several points that are being brought forward, and hopefully, by halfway this year, we will see a plan, and then we as a parliament can have our input as well and the government, of course, because the government will have to execute the plan. We as a parliament, we are the legislative body, we control the government. It's our job to see if the government does what it's supposed to do for the people of, in this case, Aruba.
Thank you, Mr. Molina.
Yeah, I just want to know if one of my colleagues, some colleagues here in the hall, he's usually not shy, but this evening he's shy. Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to know if he felt called to say something, but that's okay. All right, then give the mic back to Kelly.
All right, so we're following up with the next question.
Yes. My name is Saranda Jackson. I have one comment and two comments. The first one, what's in a word? When you say African slave, that is not a species. Africans were enslaved. It's a bad word. That's one. The second one, since the Durban Declaration and Program of Actions in 2001, which those three countries signed, many more programs of the United Nations have been followed up. The most recent being the United Nations Decade for People of African Descent. And that turned out to be necessary, 10 years plan to encourage all those countries, all those member states of the United Nations who didn't comply.
Great. Thanks for the comment, Miss. What I meant with the Black Lives Matter is what we have seen that even though the clock started ticking in 2001, for the last 3 years we have seen the clock ticking faster, especially from the United Nations with regards to declarations being done by the High Commissioners, movements around the countries. It's like the pressure is on. So the same goes for us. The pressure is on us as well to put a pressure on them of what they have to serve us with now. They have made movements, but what would that mean now for us? And we have to respond to that. And I feel personally that we're not ready. Even if we speak within the kingdom with other countries in the kingdom, everybody is still searching. But okay, we're here now, and what now? And that's why when I received the invitation for tonight, it was really enlightening, because this is what we need. We need to sit down with the people. We need to hear. We need to know the feelings, the desires, and what eventually this would mean also for the future of our island, in our togetherness. If we want to get something back, this should not also mean getting something back for today, but also for the future. And what would that mean in the long term? But I agree. One thing is, everything starts with a movement from our people, from our community. If we want to see something happen or change, it's us as a whole. And that's very important now as well. We have to stand together, we have to identify together, and we have to decide together. And in order together, we will have to hear you and voice it out for you all out there. And hopefully, even though it's difficult, we can get as far as we can to a consensus and make it clear that this is what we desire as Aruba currently.
Thank you. I was told by the boss that I skipped this gentleman here, so my apologies. Let's go over here before we get to the other side.
Thank you. My name is Jaap Joan. I would say I'm an advised student in the field of these kind of projects. Listening. At this point, I think it's very important that by July, what's needed is a task force for strategic inventory. What we need now is a task force and a strategic inventory. And in a strategic inventory, as Denny pointed out, you will discover that if you are not more specific, it's very far. And the exercise there is, how can you narrow it down to something feasible? Right now, of course, the big desire will be there. What can you do? And that may be very technical, because you sometimes can get one piece done with broken the ice. You have made a pathway, it's called in your linguistic program. You know that? You've made a pathway, yeah, and done that. Drawbacks, difficulties, what are some of them? Yeah, pitfalls. And that's what we got to start tackling, prioritizing them, and look at which one is the most significant, or which ones are. And we got to start looking at how can we do that? And eventually, the initial point you put to start with may change too. But it will change due to the process that you go through. And often, in the old times, they used to say, the media is the message, the transformation, the process of the message. So the process is very important. The other part here, I think, going back about, what do you want to train over the years for airlines. And the airlines got screwed up. I think we're here to get very defensive. What we train them is to acknowledge that we've done wrong, something went wrong, and at the end, get the acknowledgement. You say, okay, and at the end you say, how would you like us to fix this? And they're surprised. Wow! Yeah. So it is that matter. How would it be right now? You know this, you listen to meetings, this, we can take care of it, but how else can we make this up to you? That question also, people think, oh, we're going to have first class, right? Just give me that you initiated a possibility of you. That's the one that we, how can we still? That's just what I wanted to share. But the task force, strategic inventory.
Thank you. Anyone wants to chime in on that?
Yes.
Well, we need a task force.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Bourgeon. You're right, practical stuff, right? What can be done now, what is being done right now. And I was just scrolling through the CARICOM list again. And number 10 on the list of 10, but definitely not unimportant, is debt cancellation. Correct. Thank you, Karim. And before I talk about the debt cancellation, I must say, and I must remind everybody, that we almost went in a terrible direction in the law, red threat. And that would reverse actually the direction that we're going in right now for us to be able to take decisions within our own country. We would go back almost to the time of colonialism, where people from outside the country taking all the decisions for us right here in Aruba. Debt cancellation is not for nothing, because colonizers, they have the strategy of putting the colony that can reset us is something that can help us to get back at least to zero and grow from there. Because right now we are very far below zero. And right now that is something on the table where it's being spoken with the Dutch government to see what can happen to the money they have loaned to Aruba, for us to try to at least minimize it and see, hopefully, maybe even cancel it. So it is a point on the list from the CARICOM, and it is something that is being worked on as we speak.
I just wanted to react to what colleague Molina said. It is indeed point number 10 from CARICOM, but I want to question if the Aruban debt is a direct result of the slavery that went on. You know, that's I want to question that. You know, forgive me, maybe it's a legal mind, but I need to be able to construe slavery that took place here and that leading up to the depth that we currently have. I can imagine, I'm not an economist or financially trained, maybe in the CARICOM countries, they were able to construe that connection between the effects of slavery and inequality, and then leading on to the position, the financial position of the country. But I would like to see a study done for Aruba with regards to this topic as well.
Okay. Go right ahead, Mr. Molina.
Well, I think debt in general is not something strange or something bad for a country to have. Even Holland has a lot of debts. But I think it can be an issue if it is something that is being used to keep a nation in the grip. Then yes, that is a problem, and there must be a solution to get rid of that debt.
All right. So we're following up there, Mr. Amana.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Amara. I have a few comments and a question. The comments lead to the question. So I'm not from Aruba, but I do identify as a black person. I'm from the United States. I've been here for a little while now. But you had asked about what we should do, like to know what we want. And I think the problem that kind of he spoke about was that people can't say they don't actually know what happened. And so if people don't know what happened, and they don't know what privilege they have, because there's people who think that there's no racism happening. There's racism everywhere, even here. Someone had literally told me there was no racism in Aruba, which because they're not a black person or a person that identifies as a person of color, they don't see it because they don't have to, because that's privilege. So if you're not educating people to understand what happened for almost 200 years, how can you really specifically? So my question is how are you going to actually educate people on slavery? Because in order to actually move forward, people have to just not have a blanket apology, but people need to see how their privilege and their closest to the colonizers, how that is creating like their privilege and their opportunities. So if someone is coming from an enslaved African background, they are not getting the same opportunities as someone who might not have that background. So I think that is the biggest thing, is because, and to the law point is like, the law was created by the colonizers. So how do we then re-educate the entire system, because it's all based in a system of oppression? So that's, I mean, I guess that's a very big question, but I think that's something to be thought about. Is like, how do you ask people what they want if they don't actually know what really happened?
You see, actually, I think we do what we want, because this is one of the points also on the list of 10 from CARICOM. Can you want to say something?
Many thanks for the comment. And I mentioned earlier, when we met last February between all the parliaments of the kingdom, the only subject we had consensus on was education. So basically, what we have to realize ourselves that the curricula we have grown up with is curricula based on the European and even American history. And we haven't been taught of who we ourselves, what our history is. We haven't had any curriculum in Aruba, I think, telling us of the African history and how many information, books, or sessions like these are promoted on our island to remind ourselves from where we come. And that's where we have to start. And when we started tonight, I mentioned knowing the purpose of what we are talking about. We can talk about procedures, we can talk about laws, we can talk about what do we want, but at the end of the day, even if we know what we want, we have to know the purpose and the goal of it. And we have to identify it. And how do we identify it is by knowing who we are, by knowing what we represent, by knowing what we have to, what do we mean for ourselves and for our community. And this will also mean for Aruba to make big changes and to be willing to also adapt our educational system, including and recognizing our Aruba, our people, our culture that is indeed very diversified, but that's who we are. And we have to learn from our children to educate all of
the discussion is who wrote them indeed, and can we, based on principles of natural law, can we say that these codes that were drafted, they were null and void? Yes, so that's definitely part of the whole discussion. To give an example, for instance, from the Second World War, when the Tribunal of Nuremberg went on to convict, and to try rather, war criminals, the law that it created, the procedural law rather, that it created to put these folks on trial, was of course a law that was drafted after the atrocities were committed. They were able to turn to natural law. This is something that lawyers do, and say based on natural law, these Nazis' law were invalidated, and thus they were able to proceed. So we have a president, but the legal community needs to warm up, needs to be convinced this is the best way to handle when it regards the enslavement of Africans and the slavery trade. Yeah. So thanks for that contribution.
Thank you, Luciano. Celeste, is there anything coming across the Facebook page?
Just comments.
Okay, so no questions.
No comments.
We move on to Mr. Gregory Richardson.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, of course, for taking your time and sharing with us. I think the conversation is very valuable and also important. I have actually a question, perhaps because we have the lawyers here and so forth, we can have a better idea how it works. When it comes to the discussion regarding, let's say, transatlantic slavery and the descendants of those who were enslaved, we often have this conversation, especially on the islands, specifically on the different islands, specifically related to slavery that took place on the island of Aruba. Okay, I see Luke here, and this is something that we also brought forward in the past as well. So specifically on the island. But knowing that, let's say, the Caribbean, of course, if you take the entire, let's say, the Americas as a whole, but specifically the Caribbean, the migration process has been actually at the foundation of our societies. First and foremost, within the Dutch Caribbean, quote unquote. So when we talk about the descendants of those who have been enslaved on these islands, you have, of course, those who were enslaved on Aruba, but also those who were enslaved, for example, on Statia, Sable, St. Martin, Curacao, Bonaire, and who have then migrated to the Dominican Republic, etc., Haiti, etc. So legally, how does that work? So I was just concerned about that.
All right. Well, we will have to lay that, of course, down in law on the definition of if we come to that place where we will have reparations, who would be able to claim whatever reparations there is? If we say we're going to deal with the territory of Aruba, if we can lay down in law, everyone who can claim African descendant and you're living here, then you will fall thereunder. I believe it becomes a very difficult task. It needs to be doable as well. Huh? It becomes a difficult task if we start and say, okay, let's say who have 5 generations and you're a descendant of Africa and you have 5 generations here on Aruba. It becomes somewhat more complicated. I think we need to look at a very doable situation and say, okay, who's living here now currently, that this is taking place, and then construe that sense of they will to grant the right to everyone who can claim African descendants now living in Aruba. I would go for a more practical, doable solution, my opinion.
Can I say something real quick?
We got a lot of hands up, but we had people who had hands up before, so you have a
right?
Yeah, I just want to say very quickly, with that very broad definition of African descent, someone coming straight from Nigeria will be able to claim. I think the definition is too broad.
If you're going to react, please.
Yeah, so just to react very quickly, with that very broad definition of African descent, someone that's coming straight from Nigeria or Congo or any African country here would be able to claim reparations. I think the definition is too broad.
No, I would go through the definition, sorry, let me clarify. What I mean, everyone who can claim that they are descendants here, let's say in the Caribbean or the Americas, of those who were enslaved, that is clear, then you can claim. So we will not look and see if you're a recent migrant from Haiti, or your family has 200 years presence here in Aruba.
Maybe it's important also to add that if the intent of the law is, for example, for reparation, then we'll have to go back to the initial explanation of Mr. Milliard of accepting and knowing that we are expecting this reparation from the Dutch. So that would also mean that it would be probably a kingdom law, and that would limit us at some point to include the whole Caribbean in it. So it all depends how we're gonna make.
Yeah, we'll switch it up. If you're short, and not a long comment, because we have to be out of the establishment. Okay, thank you.
Well, my question is pretty simple. How would you describe, or think of it from a point of view of people in the 20s? They have a different concept of slavery now in comparison to what it was back then. So how would the government interpret that then to someone in the 20s?
Can it be clarified, because are we having it about modern slavery, or it's just a different interpretation from other people because of other reasons?
Yeah, modern slavery.
Interesting.
Well, then the link between slavery is slavery. But what we identify nowadays as modern slavery, and examples such as human trafficking, the question is then, what is the purpose of wanting to codifying laws for slavery in general? For example, do we want to criminalize human trafficking? I think yes. Do we want to criminalize slavery and try to identify what happened back then and criminalize it still? I don't think so, because the results and the legacy of that type of slavery is what we're living in now. But I don't think our focus currently is to just criminalize, but also to get back what they took from us. And modern slavery is currently, in my personal opinion, more a subject that we have to codify in law and we have to address in laws and criminalize it because it's currently still happening and it has become a way of living. It's just not something we're living with a legacy of, but we have to be more currently ad hoc attending what is happening now. Both of them unacceptable.
If I change the meaning of your question a little bit into what do people in the 20s know or think about this kind of slavery we're talking about, I think we have to refer again to consciousness, awareness. What do you know about slavery? And actually, the concept of slavery and what happened in the past should be equal for everybody in all age groups. So that we come down again to education, for everybody to know what it really is, and for everybody to have the same picture about it.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Benedicta. I'm a lecturer at the University of Aruba. I'll try to keep my 2 questions short. They're actually mainly for the politicians because Luciano, you explained the law process so well. We talked a lot about reparations. The second question is, sir, you mentioned that on number 10 of the Capricorn program is, for example, having a cancellation of the debt. I'm not Aruban, so let me clarify that. From what I know of Aruban history is that you do have a population that has background with slavery, so their ancestors were slaves, but you also do have a proportion where the ancestors were slaveholders, and these are the population that continues to be politically active, and therefore you could say, well, the Aruban debt is primarily caused by the other side of the population. Now, if you say you're going to cancel it, do you see it as a solution for the people seeking reparations, or are you actually making the people who also played a role in slavery and in the debt, isn't that more a solution for them? I'm just curious about your thoughts.
I'll answer the first one. Reaching to a consensus within the kingdom is not an easy task. The diversity within between our islands arises even more when we are at the table. So what we have learned and what we have experienced within the kingdom discussions and during interparliamentary meetings, for example, it hasn't been easy. Let's take an example, the law on giving solution to conflicts within the kingdom. We have been busy with rekening almost 30 years, I think, because of the diversity within the kingdom. So I'll go back to where we started tonight, identifying and having clear what we stand for and trying to find the partners at the table, finding themselves in what you are proposing, is currently now the main goal before reaching a consensus. And again, what I felt last meeting is the experience of Curacao, the history of Curacao differs a lot from Aruba and St. Martin. So if we come together at a table, we cannot expect to have consensus at once. One thing, I'll repeat tonight, one thing we all had consensus on, educational part. I think that's very strong, and when you have a strong point, you will have to start on that first, and by then define the rest of it. But it's not impossible, but it's gonna take time to get there.
Just briefly, Benedicta, you raised a very interesting topic in the debate, where you're asking what maybe I should raise that question when I visit once more in that setting of historically privileged institution, if maybe we should look for the reparations there. And I'm looking at like some members from the Protestant church. Yeah, but very interesting. I just find it interesting. No one ever raised in this discussion, to my knowledge, that aspect in the discussion. So I'll think about it even more.
Thank you, Mr. Luciano. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much. We had a couple more questions. Very interesting. We cannot promote modern day slavery. These two young ladies have to go home. So on that, we'll have to leave it there. Panelists, I want to thank you. I'm going to give you the opportunity for some closing remarks, and then we'll close it out there.
Thank you for the invitation to We Culture. It was a pleasure and honor to be here to talk about a very difficult topic. And reparation definitely is something that we have to keep in mind. It is a complicated topic. Who will come in remark for it? Is the individual something? People who live on the island, people who come from a certain area? Or is it something that goes for the country? Interesting. Thank you very much.
Where do I start? I want to give thanks for this invitation. I want to give thanks for all of you being here. I hope the message was left in here today, that we as your voices need you guys to help us identify how we're gonna move forward with this subject and what do we want to get from it. So I hope you can go back home and speak to your family, speak to your friends, educate everyone. This is what we're living in. What do we want? Where do we want to go? And I think in every other way it has affected one of us, ancestors or not, currently educating our children of racism. That's all affects or the legacy that has been left behind. So once again, I hope we can come back soon and that we have a clearer view of what we are talking about, and so we can give the message out there as well, is that this is the urban community's needs and wants, and what do we want to do with any law that we have, and what would be the purpose desired for our work. Many thanks again, and I think it was a very nice and interactive session, so very great. Thank you.
He constructed the concept of the shadow, and this is definitely a collective shadow, and you need to confront the shadow in order to grow. So let's confront the shadow and let's grow. Thank you. Thank you. Santiago wanted to make a presentation to the parliamentarians, I presume?
Exactly.
Okay, please do that.
Yes. I think you might have noticed that there was a protest a couple of weeks ago where I wanted to hand the manifest to the king, the manifest about reparations, and it has different topics in it. I think if you read it, nobody of the Parliament of Aruba has ever approached me to get a copy of this after the protest, but I'm using this opportunity to hand it to you. It has a lot of information, and one of the first purposes for reparations is to bring back the humanity of the people that were enslaved even before it was abolished. So here's a copy for both.
Thank you. So, like I said, we cannot promote modern day slavery. Kids gotta